Well, Singapore has announced a $1.5 billion package to help vulnerable groups and businesses fight rising inflation and higher energy prices. Deputy Prime Minister Lawrence Wong says last year's better-than-expected fiscal performance will help fund the package. There will be no further draw on past reserves. Every household will receive $100 to offset their utility bills. Some 1.5 million lower-income Singaporeans will also receive a special payment of up to $300 on top of their regular GST voucher cash payout. There's also help for the self-employed who depend on their vehicles for a living. This includes a one-off relief of $150 for taxi main hirers and private car drivers impacted by higher fuel costs. For lower-wage workers earning up to $2,500, the government will co-fund 75% of the eligible wage increases. That's up from the current 50%. The Jobs Growth Incentive, which expires in September, will also be extended until March of next year. A new grant will also provide up to 70% support to help firms in food services, food manufacturing and retail sectors adopt energy-efficient equipment.
We have to make sure that we are not only dealing with the here and now and the immediate issues of cost of living and inflation, but we must accelerate our momentum for reforms and ensure Singapore emerges from this crisis with a stronger economic and fiscal position. And this is what will enable us to deal with any uncertainties, any challenges, because we do not know how prolonged or how deep the challenges will be in the future. And it's much better that we prepare ahead of time, make sure that we are in a strong and sound position to deal with any of these challenges, but also to be able to seize the many opportunities, the new opportunities that may emerge in the future.
And people we spoke to have welcomed the additional GST voucher payment and household utilities credits. That's even if the payouts may not be able to cover much of their expenses.
$100 and $200 will not last us. Will not take us anywhere anyway. However, how small it is still a contribution, right? So how small it is, we still appreciate,
It's good for us, usually, because seldom they give this kind of amount. So it's easier for us to have extra expenses to buy groceries or whatever.
多少是有一点说帮到完是不可能啊，好过没有。
你分了钱，你不负担就不用重。
Well, businesses say the support package with its bigger loans and wage credit scheme will go a long way to help them manage operating costs. But some say it doesn't go far enough, especially when it comes to hiring workers. Claire Lee finds out what more firms are hoping to see.
Businesses say they're looking forward to having authorities co-fund a larger share of wage increases. For local employees drawing no more than $2,500 per month, the government will fork out 3/4 of the increment. This is up from the current 50%. For the next tier up to $3,000, the share that authorities pay will rise from 30% to 45%. A trade union representing employers says that easing the burden for companies also bodes well for workers.
Knowing that the government is actually increasing the level of support, employers can also consider granting higher wage increase for their low-wage workers, which will in turn help the low-wage workers cope with the high inflation that we're experiencing.
There's also more wage support with the extension of the Jobs Growth Incentive. It helps firms hire mature job seekers as well as people with disabilities. It will be extended for another 6 months until next March. But one business association cautions that this may not be enough for smaller companies.
We feel that there is a need to basically look at a now slightly differentiated policies, at least for small and micro companies in terms of their ability to hiring foreign talent. This is important because small and micro companies do not have the same resource as large local enterprise or MNCs.
But he concedes that other measures in the support package will provide some relief. They include a new grant that provides smaller firms with up to 70% support to adopt energy-efficient equipment. Companies will also be able to apply for bigger loans. The maximum loan quantum will double to $10 million from 1st July until the end of March next year.
we're really glad that the government is responding in this direction, because businesses are going to be facing a much heavier direct impact in terms of borrowing costs.
To help with higher fuel costs, eligible taxi and private hire car drivers will get a one-off cash relief of $150 in August. Those who are members of the National Private Hire Vehicles Association and the National Delivery Champions Association can also apply for a one-off cash relief of up to $300. The government says the measures are designed to avoid stoking inflationary pressure. But one analyst believes this may be unavoidable, and businesses will need to look for a more permanent solution.
We really have to set our sight on the longer term, all right? And more importantly, is for the companies to make the necessary adjustment in terms of streamlining the processes, and also to continue to raise their overall productivity.
He says this is necessary for Singapore's economy to transform.
So what can we make of the timing, and how far will the package go in easing the pinch of inflation? We have two experts joining us to provide clarity. Dr. Tan Ee Kiap is Associate Professor of Public Policy at the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy, and Mr. Swan Teck Kin is Head of Research at UOB. Perhaps, Dr. Tan, let's start with you. Now, this $1.5 billion support package targeted at the vulnerable, the low-income group. This is usually the starting point. Is it the right starting point, the right approach?
Yeah, of course, at this time, it's better it comes down than later, because the inflation pressure is building up. And this 300 special payment of GST voucher on top of the regular payment, $300 to many of us may not sound a lot, but for lower income household, this, I think, is a very important support. And although $100 of utility credit are given to every Singaporean household, I would have thought we don't need this. This should be more for the lower income. But in any case, I can see also government coming in to support the progressive wage scheme by co-funding to up to 75%, and also the growth incentive to help mature workers. I think they are targeting at the right income level for Singaporean household, and I expect government to do more as the inflationary pressure build up. We're going to make sure their real wage increase are not eroded with the rising inflation. So this is a good step. It's timely, but I expected the government to do more as the situation turns more severe.
Yeah,
there should be a recession kicking in.
Absolutely, and that's a very good point, because many people have asked, given the severity of the situation and potentially getting worse, why not just delay the GST hikes?
Okay, I think at this point, so go ahead, Dr. Tan.
Dr. Tan, perhaps you first.
Okay, now I think it is important we have to be very clear. This GST hike is part of the tax structure reform. Now, if we raise the GST, then it becomes a stable source of government revenue. We can allow the middle class personal income tax to remain the same, and except touching on the highest personal income tax bracket. But again, this GST hike is part of structural reform, but it's not enough to support the aging populations for healthcare expenses. But this simply is allowing the middle class to have their personal income tax remain the same. And given the competition, that corporate income tax should not increase, because we have competition now with foreign companies coming to Singapore to invest, both from the Europe, US, Japan, and China. So I think this structural reform, we have 2 or 3 more % to go, and we must push it through. And in this difficult time, so I think that is good for middle class. So there's no pressure to raise their personal income tax, and it's also good for companies that they can expect the corporate profit tax to remain competitive.
So Dr. Tan's approaching it from a structural perspective. Mr. Swan, you also had some thoughts about delaying the GST. Give us your thoughts, but also talk to us about how it is from the employer's perspective. With such a tight labour market, salaries have to go up to retain workers. Is it enough for them?
Right, Jill, this in terms of GST, I think the hike cannot be delayed. Actually, I wanted to point out that it should not be delayed because for like what Dr. Tan said is a structural issue. What we need to deal with right now is our healthcare costs have gone up significantly because of aging population, and healthcare expenses are actually the largest item on the budget. It is actually ahead of defense and also education. It used to be the reverse, but because of the aging population, healthcare expenses have gone up with number one. So the GST increase is needed to plug the gap in terms of these expenses for healthcare. Now, the other thing to note is that in the GST, if you were to delay further, we really don't know what the situation is going to be like down the road. Let's say a recession. If a recession happens, you have a GST hike that is going to be even worse, right? So I think we are riding the wave of recovery from the COVID situation, post-COVID recovery. I think it's timely to hike the GST at this point to pick the payment. Yes.
And Mr. Swan, the second question I had was from the employer's perspective, a bit of a mixed bag. You heard Kurt Wee there saying, not quite enough. They have to increase salaries to retain their workers. Do you think these measures will go far enough?
I think these are the first steps, Jill, in terms of this jobs growth initiative and also a progressive wage program there. And that will help to, I think, alleviate some of the cost pressures from employers because they have to fight with among all tight labor market, right? So the costs have gone up, and then you have inflation added to it as well. And at the same time, I think the government has extended the enterprise financing scheme for the programs. So the two programs, one is on working capital, the other one on trade loans. I think that will help also in terms of defraying some of the expenses and costs as inflation pushing up costs all over the place, Jill.
Very quickly to both you gentlemen, starting with Dr. Tan, the government, as you have explained, looking to keep up economic momentum, yet manage inflation, while at the same time keep possible recession on the horizon. What must we see or what must they consider for the next budget? Dr. Tan, you first.
But I think I'm very concerned about the SMEs, small and medium enterprises, because when they're just about to recover from the COVID situation over the last 2 years, should we go to another recession? So the SMEs need a lot of funding from the government in terms of wage credit scheme, job growth incentive. But this is a classic case of money not enough. So we have to depend on net investment income return by Temasek, MS, and GIC. So I expected if the situation get worse, the supplementary funding to our budget going forward would have to be focusing on SME because they are the one who are creating jobs.
Okay, focus on SMEs. What about Mr. Swan?
The going is getting tough.
Okay, I think the focus will be continuing to be on the weaker part of the society, the low income, the more vulnerable part of the society, because you have inflation pushing up, and then if there is a recession coming in, the hardest hit other than SMEs, I think it will be the vulnerable groups. So the government will have to pay quite a bit of attention to that coming out from the COVID recovery, which already affected a large part of this vulnerable group of the society. Jill.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. As usual, time has caught up with us. I do appreciate both your perspectives and discussion. I've been speaking there with Dr. Tan Gi Kiap from the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy, as well as Mr. Swan Teck Kin from UOB.
Singapore still expects to see healthy economic growth this year as borders reopen and business activities resume. The signs of a global recession could see the situation take a turn for the worse. Still, Deputy Prime Minister Lawrence Wong and his team are assuring Singaporeans that help will be given where it's needed. Michelle Teo with this report.
The $1.5 billion support package may have been targeted at more vulnerable groups, but the newly minted Deputy Prime Minister faced a deluge of questions on issues cutting across income groups, from the rising cost of living to prospects of a global recession.
We'll have to see what happens to the global economy next year, whether there is a recession and how severe the recession will be and how it impacts Singapore. So these are This is something we will continue to monitor very closely, as I mentioned, and we will adjust our programs and measures as needed according to this dynamic situation.
Citing 3 rounds of monetary policy tightening by the central bank, Mr. Wong added that these preemptive moves have helped to slow down the momentum of price increases. Even then, Singaporeans are still feeling the pinch from rising costs. For instance, property prices continue to go up and higher interest rates weigh down on mortgage affordability. Mr. Wong said that household balance sheets are still healthy and that the rise in property prices is driven by economic fundamentals. Top of mind for many reporters was the increase in GST due in less than 6 months' time. Mr. Wong said there will be no change to the timeline of implementation as the revenue raised from other possibilities such as raising personal income, property and luxury car tax is not enough. He also said that most Singaporeans will not feel the impact of the GST increase for at least 5 years because of an enhanced offset package. But Mr. Wong and his team stressed that inflation is not the only beast that Singapore will have to slay moving forward. Threats include supply chain disruptions arising from the Ukraine war, compounded with a more dangerous COVID variant as winter approaches.
We have to deal more fundamentally with a very different operating environment. Different sorts of challenges, including climate change, more bifurcated world externally and within Singapore, domestic challenges too, including our rapidly aging population. And to prepare Singapore well for these challenges, we have to press ahead with our economic reforms. We cannot afford to slow down. And that includes ensuring that we have a strong and sustainable fiscal position going forward.
There are also some very important areas that we want to focus on, and I would say no regrets move, because these are ways to further differentiate ourselves from the competition, build stronger enterprise and workforce capabilities through economic restructuring and transformation, through upskilling and lifelong learning.
These aim to help attract more investments and generate more jobs to position Singapore stronger for the future.